This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 261, entitled Women's Hated Amoral Criminality Against Men. Description. This flyer lists some of the main ways women commit amoral crimes against men, making themselves hated by men. These include manslavery, the financial massacring of men in the divorce courts, feminazi man dumping, feminazi doxing of MGTOWs and masculists, and cancelling of MGTOW and masculist channels on YouTube. The flyer itself. Women's Hated Amoral Criminality Against Men by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer lists in bulleted form the main ways in which women commit amoral crimes against men, resulting in a real hatred of women by their male victims. This list is then followed by an elaboration of each item in the list, and finally suggestions on what men, and particularly masculists, can do to stop women from committing these amoral crimes. Here is a list of the major ways in which women commit amoral crimes against men. Bullet. Manslavery by fluffy parasites. Bullet. Financial massacring of men in fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts. Bullet. Feminazi man dumping. Bullet. Feminazi doxing of MGTOWs and masculists. Bullet. Feminazi removal of YouTube channels. And now elaborating. Manslavery by fluffy parasites. The biggest amoral crime committed by women against men is manslavery. Men gave women the contraceptive pill that men invented, allowing women to reliably control the number of children they want, which is typically now 0, 1 or 2, so that women now have a career window of some 40 years. The masculists, that's men's livers, point the finger at women and tell them that, quote, now that you women can work, you must work. Anything else is parasitism of the labour of men, end quote. However, in today's world, 3/4 of young women at age 16 choose to become fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off the money of a man, by bribing a manslave with access to her vagina in exchange for him working for her, that is, sex for manslavery. This is amoral, that is, it is immoral, that is, unethical, unjust, and yet these fluffies feel no guilt about what they are doing. It comes naturally to them. They evolve to be like that. That is, female cunt for male hunted meat over several million years. Now that women can work, they must work. This is a basic ethical principle of the masculists, who have a hatred of fluffies, who are seen by masculists as being immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin. That is, millions of fluffies, billions of them. The primary political goal of the masculists is to free men from manslavery worldwide this century by wiping out the fluffies, not by killing them, but by totally ignoring them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, being manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, poor and shunned by society, as society becomes increasingly sympathetic to masculist ideas as they are presented on the broadcast media. That is happening now with greater regularity. Most young women take it for granted that when they grow up, they will get a man to work for them, take care of them, pay for them, to have babies in a middle-class house that he pays for. Masculists tell women, fip up or be manless. The fipping of women is one of the primary political social goals of the Masculists, to free men from manslavery. Bullet. Financial massacring of men in fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts. The traditional family is dying out as young men refuse to marry, refuse to have kids, and spend their money on themselves, eschewing fluffies like the plague. Young men are doing this largely because of the fluffy feminist hypocrites who took over the divorce courts in the 70s, making them utterly toxic for men because roughly one married father in 4 is routinely financially massacred and has his life ruined by being treated as a subhuman cash machine by the hated, amoral, fluffy feminists who commit the following crimes against divorcing fathers. He will have his kids ripped away from him with a 90% probability. He will lose his house to his fluffy ex-wife so that she can raise her kids in it. He will lose half of his possessions that are given to her. He will be forced to make child payments for kids he will barely see, and often forced to pay alimony to his fluffy ex-wife, often for life, with no moral or legal obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass, fip up and get a job, so that she does not continue to parasite off him after the divorce the way she did before the divorce. These divorce crimes, millions of them, committed by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, in brackets, wanting equal rights with men, but rejecting equal obligations with men, that is, bothering to get a career-competent education, so that as adults these women pull their financial weight and not be motivated to parasite fluffy style off a man's money, close brackets, occur on a massive society-wide scale. More than 10 million US men have been financially massacred in this way. It's a crime on a gigantic scale and tops the list of amoral crimes against men committed by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who feel no guilt about what they have done. In fact, just the opposite. Many divorcing fluffies have divorce parties to celebrate the windfall of money they get awarded by the fluffy feminist divorce courts, paid for by their ex-husbands, so they can continue to be fluffies, so they can continue to be manslavers to their male victims. These amoral fluffies feel no remorse for the fact that they have destroyed the life of their ex-husband. It's this lack of sympathy for the divorce-raped man that makes men have a hatred for the amorality of women's gender crimes. Masculists have a real hatred for these fluffy parasites, and especially for the fluffy feminist hypocrites who took over the divorce courts in the 70s, who commit these crimes against men on a routine basis every working day. The casualty rate amongst divorcing men is much greater than in a major war. There's a sex war when it comes to divorce, so it's not surprising that young men react by refusing to marry and refusing to have kids. The fluffy feminists, in their short-sightedness, have made divorce so toxic for men that they have indirectly become genociders, because it is the fluffy feminists who are indirectly wiping out whole populations due to the paternity boycott of young men, 70% of whom today, and probably within a decade, over 90%, reject marriage and paternity. I think we're all agreed that this is a massive crime on a societal scale that has to be stopped, or we wipe ourselves out. Bullet. Feminazi man dumping. Women have a hard time accepting responsibility for their own lives, preferring to have someone else take responsibility for it. Women are basically lazy and do not like having to make the effort to do what it takes to make their lives a success, especially in becoming FIPs, financially independent persons. The MGTOW movement, men going their own way, have a saying about feminism and women not taking responsibility for their own lives. It is, quote, "Feminism is female psychology politicized," end quote. That is, that it is typical of feminists that they blame men for everything and rarely take responsibility for women's problems on themselves. Masculists particularly, who are a lot more politically active than the passive apolitical MGTOWs, are really annoyed with the feminazis who refuse to admit that women play a major role in women's problems. For example, women are generally less admired in all societies for the simple reason that women achieve far less than men. Women are genetically inferior to men on most counts. Women are 4 IQ points dumber on average than men and have a 10% smaller IQ variance, so that the morons and the genii are males, so it's not surprising that men have won 99% of the science Nobel Prizes. Men have much higher testosterone levels than women, so are more aggressive, more driven, more ambitious, more dogged, more single-minded, and so complete difficult tasks more readily than women, who are more wishy-washy and give up more easily. The fact that the feminazis don't admit to their own shortcomings and inferiorities simply makes masculists treat them with contempt. Feminazis behave like children, blaming anyone but themselves, especially men. This is what children do, so it's not surprising that men look upon feminazis as children, who don't take responsibility for their own lives, blaming men for everything, which results in men seeing women and feminazis as children, and hence not taking them seriously, and definitely not respecting them. If the feminazis want men to respect them, it's not enough for them to demand that men respect them. Respect has to be earned, and women are not doing that. All cultures value boy babies more than girl babies because they know from long experience that a boy baby is more likely to grow up to be a highly valuable member of the culture than a girl baby, who will almost certainly grow up to be yet another baby factory and child raiser, a vital role for any culture, but not status worthy, not prestigious, because any woman can do that. The masculists sneer at feminazis with contempt because the feminazis do not behave as adults. They do not take responsibility for their own lives and situation. Masculists are really sick of being dumped on by misandrous feminazis and harangue feminazis to get off their parasitic, hypocritical asses and grow up, to take responsibility for their own lives and admit their own female inferiorities. Women cannot compete with men at the top end of the performance scale. The phenomenon of GMV, greater male variance, causes men to have performance scores that are more spread out over a whole population, so that the bottom scorers and the top scorers are male. So men outperform women at the top end across the board. Women need to accept this and just become resigned to it. It's not going to go away because it is genetically based. The patriarchy that the feminazis complain about so bitterly is not going to go away. Men will always outperform women for genetic reasons because men are smarter, more driven, and have a greater variance. Bullet. Feminazi doxing of MGTOWs and masculists. The feminazis feel they have the right to criticize men for the ways they think that men oppress women, but reject a corresponding right of men to criticize women for the ways men think that women oppress men. For example, with manslavery, women's treatment of men in the divorce courts, no para, etc. This is just sexist hypocrisy on the feminists' part. So when feminazis dox prominent MGTOWs and masculists, that is, feminazis discover the private details, for example, name, address, employment, etc., of some prominent MGTOW or masculist, and then contact his employer or clients to destroy him economically, so that he gets fired or loses clients, etc. This is obviously a crime, yet the feminazis, in typical amoral style, have no qualms doing it. It is one of the many reasons why masculists have such a hatred of feminazis. Doxing feminazis are utter hypocrites. They give themselves the right to criticize men, but reject the same right for men to criticize women. Masculists feel that there's so much irrational, illogical, amoral behavior coming from the feminazis, which makes them treat feminazis as dangerous children, not to be viewed as full adults. Bullet. Feminazi removal of YouTube channels. The MGTOWs and masculists need to spread their ideas to society if they are to change society. MGTOWs refuse to marry and refuse to have kids. They are making large numbers of YouTube videos on MGTOW themes now, similarly with the masculists. Unfortunately for the men's lib movements, that's MGTOW, masculists, MRM, that's men's rights movement, the boss of YouTube is a Jewish feminazi who is now censoring and downright deleting MGTOW/masculist channels from YouTube because she's a feminazi. She is showing her sexist hypocrisy in the same way as the feminazi doxers. She feels she has the right to criticize men as a feminist, but at the same time abuses her power as the CEO of YouTube to censor, block and delete MGTOW/masculist channels. This woman is truly hated by the masculists. Her own YouTube channel was swamped with thousands of negative comments by men for what she's doing. Her parent company, Google, needs to be careful with what she's doing because she has rapidly gained a terrible reputation and is severely damaging the once high reputation Google had as an innovative and creative company. But now Google is seen as a censoring institution, blocking freedom of speech, which is so damning that if it's not stopped, Google will die, killed off by general contempt from the public. The above are a sample of the main complaints of the masculists against the amoral criminality of women against men. What can the masculists do to stop this happening? There are many strategies that the masculists and the MGTOWs use. The masculists tell women two main things. One is to FIP up, that is, become career competent by becoming FIPs and pulling their own financial weight and not expect to parasite off the money of a man. The other thing is that women must vote with men to mend further gender laws, particularly in the divorce courts and the PARA, paternity rejection right, that women have, that is the MARA, maternity rejection right, but men don't. The masculists push women to vote with men because men alone do not have enough votes to force the gender politicians to mend further gender laws. Masculists tell women that if they don't FIP up and vote with men, then women will be severely punished by men, by women not getting a man. A fluffy who does not bother to become a FIP and who does not vote with men will rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, poor and shunned by society. We men have the financial power to force women to FIP up and vote with men, because nearly all men are FIPs. We are socialized that way and evolved to be FIPs. A fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some manslave, but the supply of manslaves is drying up thanks to the spread of the ideas coming from the MGTOWs and the masculists, largely via videos on YouTube, which is why the YouTube CEO, a Jewish feminazi, is so keen to suppress them, the hated, hypocritical, two-faced feminazi bitch that she is. Men are inventing the sex bot and the art womb, which within a decade will impact heavily on women. When men can grow their own kids and prefer to sex their bots rather than women, then women will be ignored by men in their millions. In short, we men have the political and ideological tools to stop women committing their amoral criminal acts against men. The masculists use masculist arguments to harangue the feminazis as fluffy hypocrites, blasting them with considerable venom and passion, so that these feminazis get the clear message that women no longer have a monopoly on gender discourse. Women have to share the gender stage with men and will be forced to tighten up their irrational is-cyanate arguments in face of severe masculist criticism, who have little patience nor tolerance for feminazi, PC, is-cyanate fairy bullshit. As masculists and MGTOW ideas spread, men will become increasingly angry at women for the amoral crimes they are committing against men and will put their foot down, forcing women to become a lot more reasonable to men or be severely punished by just not getting a man. Masculists are very conscious that men have the financial power to force women to FIP up and to vote with men to mend further gender laws. The masculists also know that they have a lot of work to do, similar to what the feminists did over the past few decades. For example, masculists need to spread their ideas to the broadcast media so that these ideas reach the millions, the masses. They need to set up men's lib groups in every high school and colleges to influence millions of students. Masculists need to set up men's studies courses at universities and write books on men's issues. Masculists need to tell women to FIP up and vote with men to pay the price of not getting a man and not having a baby, a very persuasive argument on the part of the masculists. The masculists aim at creating a FIP society in which both sexes are socialized and educated to be FIPs as adults, taking responsibility for their own lives and not wanting to parasite off the labour of men. There's a lot of work still to be done by the Masculists, but the path forward is clear. We only have to do it to get millions of men to back the plan to create a FIP society. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channels De Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers, and De Garis Essays. Ciao.